Welcome to my library, dear guest. My name is Ko, and I will be your storyteller. Lean back and relax as I read to you today's story, titled How I Joined a Shonen Anime, by the author Delta the Alpha Warrior. Hello. Just placing some horror stories here so they can be buried within these unsacred halls. So, to begin with, I would like to preference that I don't have anything against the players personally. So in that vein, I'm just going to list everyone by their class. So I came into a campaign that was already in motion. I was picked up since the other option had bailed, and so I was fitted in. The setting of the game was not Japan, that was on the cusp of a civil war due to their emperor going off the deep end. My character in this story was supposed to be a human who was cursed to be Yuan-Ti, due to killing a snake for watching her dance, trying to keep it in the more fairy tale / myth type of category for the DM to play with. I got into the game, and upon the very first session, my character was cured of her curse by the DM NPC's Kitsune cleric. So whatever plotline or redemption or lesson to be learned was completely voided in favor of getting a guide through territory. Neat. Now the party consisted of the following. Cleric, a perpetually whiny priestess who throughout the entire time I was there was always bemoaning the fact that she was chosen by God against her will. Now, this is fine on paper, but she would always retread the same ground. She'd never shut up about, "Oh, I couldn't save everyone," or "Why was I given this ability?" She constantly repeated the same character arc over and over and never stopped until the end. What's worse is that she had main character syndrome. She was in love with another DM NPC who could slash everyone within an 80-foot radius as a regular attack and had legendary actions which made him basically untouchable by any proper melee. She adopted a demon, which was also fine, except that she wouldn't let anyone try to kill the other demons that looked like her. The demon was old enough to be her mother, and she refused to let the demon fight people despite the fact that said demon needed people's blood to survive, which everyone always needed to pitch in to sustain. Next, we have Sorcerer, who I think is arguably worse. She played a custom class Oni character who could levitate at will, and her character was flippy-floppy. Her entire deal was that she hated violence, yet still engaged in it with no explanation why, and she wanted to rebuild her village. Now, Oni-related stuff aside, she would also flop back to a dumb himbo type of personality, where she would be dumb and not understand things, yet understand them when it related to her interests. Out of character, she was also the most standoffish, as when I made a joke about her character name, it literally translated to white darkness or light darkness, she thought that I was personally attacking her. Following this, we had Druid. He didn't start out as a druid, but it's better for naming conventions. Druid was extremely whiny both in character and out of character. He whined when he got hit by the DM NPC in a mock fight. He whined when his spell failed because the creature rolled high. He whined whenever he didn't get his awesome moment and would sulk for a few minutes, even one time leaving the sessions for a few minutes once without warning. Next was the Fighter, who, while following underneath the same wing of shonen mentality, they at least used their speeches sparingly, and in arguably correct situations, such as trying to talk down a demon, since Cleric didn't want to kill it. Finally, that leaves the Rogue, who I can't really tell what his personality or stakes were, as he was just sort of there. He didn't have much plot going for him, and sometimes I wonder if he was even there. Now we were sneaking through Providence in order to rescue Cleric's mom, who was apparently kidnapped because reasons. My character was designed to be a sly femme fatale type, whose purpose wasn't pure combat, but to redirect and charm out the opposition. Her spells were suited to more manipulation and subtlety. This was only ever used once, which was promptly never used again to get past a guard outpost, and that's it. Even when we came upon the group escorting the woman, despite my abilities of stealth and having our rope with us, we resorted to straight-out ambush, with the only part of misdirection being using a horse to direct gunfire. So, we saved the mom and the princess that was accompanying her, only to have the sudden reveal of Cleric's friend, who was a shapeshifter. From out of nowhere, I might add, right after finding and reviving the dead corpse of Cleric's other friend. So the shapeshifter gave a speech about how cruel it was for there to be gods. Why can't we have god powers, etc. It felt like something out of a cheesy wannabe anime, because right after that, she said they were forced to fight and used her god juice. We fight before the gods themselves struck down the shapeshifter, which was immediately made moot as the cleric revived them right after the gods just killed them, sobbing about it, which caused the gods to okay it. It's from here that we learned the entire war was orchestrated by a shadow council, and that the emperor was merely a puppet in all of this. We bring this information back to the cities that were preparing to go to war, only for them to disregard this information and go to war anyway, despite physical evidence and testimony by one of the shadow members. From here, we are given a choice. Either be part of the war or go on our own way. However, it was obviously going to be join the war effort, as 4 out of 6 party members were involved with it. Cleric having their hobby be in the war, Rogue just doing assassin things, Sorcerer being MMX8X, and the Fighter at least having an okay reason to join. It was at this point that I decided to retire my UNT. She was basically useless, and it was going towards full combat. She had no reason to stick around, and no one wanted to interact well. The height of her interaction was at a bar, where she was scolded for using her charm abilities by the cleric and told she was a bad person by the sorcerer, whom she silenced using silence. Mind you, the conversation was supposed to be peaceful, but the two kept trying to hammer their virtues aggressively, and I could tell it was getting heated, so I tried to make everyone cool off by the silence is golden rule, which just caused them to get more angry, despite telling them that this conversation was only escalating. Now we enter into my new character, who I will call Bonk. She was a barbarian monk who was also a bioweapon designed for all-terrain combat, whose entire purpose in life was to hunt down the one who created her. Unfortunately, this was not explored nor questioned, as the party just accepted her despite giving a brutal opening of showing her more animalistic nature by dragging an animal corpse in her mouth. I know that it's not the most social way, but she was supposed to be the reserved type, and I thought that there would be natural curiosity, if not caution, around her. Nope. She immediately gets accepted, and they get sent over to the boat to the new war zone. Getting to the tower was fine. It was in the tower when it turned the worst. The Emperor, despite knowing that we were coming, was inside the throne room with his undead Demon Slayer knockoffs. So, of course, he dies immediately, since the sorcerer can just cast Storm Sphere. Good job, Secret Service. So the head Demon Slayer, whom we faced before, had just frightened us, and I had gotten out of my fear. So naturally, in Bonk's eyes, this threat was enough in order for her to induce her pseudo-rage, forcing her body to contort as she grew her bestial feature. It was supposed to be a huge reveal that she was a Path of the Beast barbarian. She had only used her monk abilities thus far. The moment was quickly dashed, however, as she only needed to use one punch to defeat the guy. However, since she was in a primal rage type of mind, she continued to beat down the bones of the undead Demon Slayer. Of course, this was ignored, as the DM described the bones being reformed, despite me literally beating on its body and combat essentially being over. And the DM NPC Kitsune, who I learned here had 40 hit dice due to an AoE aura that dealt damage based on hit dice, and she was most likely a level 40 character. wanted everyone to clear out of the room while waving her death flag as a wave of force came from the bones of the undead, which pushed everyone back. The problem was, I was on the other side of the room because I was trying to flank. So not only were my character's actions ignored, but she got hand-waved being carried off by the cleric's boy toy and the rogue who was AFK at the time, despite having mech strength and raging from the other side of the room. Right after she was hand-waved, the room exploded and you'd think, oh gee, guess the kitsune is dead now, right? Wrong. Not only did she survive 40 d8 of damage, an explosion, and being cut through the stomach, along with falling from 200 stories, she managed to live along with the undead demon slayer. Now, remember when I mentioned that my character was looking for a creator, the one responsible for arguably the creation of a race? Well, it just so happened that he was in the same city that we were attacking. He was also the one to explain how to kill the undead demon slayer because the DM thought we were bringing the civilian with us on a magic broom with the DM NPC Kitsune, being able to figure out how to kill the guy whose motivations were basically flames of vengeance. So of course Bonk decides to take the scientist to safety before being able to finally kill the guy and relish in it. All within less than 1 day of meeting the party. Now, the problem with this was the same with the Yuan-Ti. She was given her objective and had no reason to grow as a person. No one talked to her, she accepted herself as a weapon, and so there was no reason for there to be any growth. Not to mention that this guy was super important for essentially making the Simic hybrids. You'd think that he'd have some type of backup system or security since he's a high-profile target. Nope, the dude had no defenses or backup plans or anything until I decided to leave the campaign. So, you would think that with the Emperor dead, knowing that the Shadow Council was behind everything and essentially having their capital, you believe the war to be over. Except the war continued for 8 months, despite us being readily available and having some of the most broken NPCs to grace the planet, while controlling their capital. So, after we faced the nothing personal kid assassin, who we're made to feel bad for despite just encountering him in the middle of nowhere, we were told that there was a wizard who could control demons and Oni with his flute. 8 months in, I might add, into the war that should have been over within a month or two. We didn't even know why the war was continuing, nor what the Empire's stance was outside of that they were evil by proxy of rebels who wanted democracy, yet still ran on the system of imperialism of how they ran their countries. Of course, this presented in the way of 2 succubi who were making manga of our exploits. So naturally, we didn't care. However, the DM managed to railroad us into getting his samurai tabaxi DM NPC to mention that this guy was a high-profile target, and that in order to win the war, we needed to take him down. What was his reason for continuing the war/fighting? Nobody knows. I'm not even sure the wizard himself knows. Any case, we managed to make our way up the tower, and eventually came across the most frustrating mechanic known to man. The DM said that they were like Pokemon transporters, which was completely false since they were fixed, but here they were randomized. So we were split up since teleportation circles kept displacing us as we faced the wizard. The wizard, being able to move through walls, found our rogue and immediately used Power World Kill on him, with us being at level 10. Bonk, the barbarian monk, was barely over 100 with the tough feat, so of course the rogue insta-dies. Q cleric trying again for 5 minutes after finding his body before reviving the rogue. So of course, I tried to head off to the wizard, who could walk through walls using my fast movement speed while everyone else used dispel magic and reactions to hit him. This led to 30 IRL minutes of running around as we basically had to wait for the druid to dispel before we could do anything with the wizard running away like a kid. I do recognize that I could have tried joining everyone waiting for the dispel magic, but I had the movement speed for the teleports, which cost a 10 feet of movement apparently despite being stepping on and off, and I thought I could cut down the cat and mouse chase, or stop any surprise effects. It's about here that I just stopped having fun. There was no interaction that wasn't Cleric's shonen plot. The druid was still whiny, as he also had no reason in character to continue, and Sorcerer was still being a himbo that immediately flipped if it didn't align with their values. Everything was melodramatic or played so straight that the characters felt more like sock puppets for us to use. It didn't help that the DM threatened to cancel the game that was apparently nearly finished anyway because he got a headache during one session. So talking with the DM, I expressed that I was no longer having fun and just wanted out. But I didn't want, which I expected from the DM, for Bonk to suddenly disappear or just wander off. If she was going to die, she was going to go out on her own terms. So I managed to get the DM to revive the dead scientist and implant Bonk with a deadly affliction that, if she were left alive, would grow and kill thousands, so the cleric couldn't revive her and would actually have to face someone dying for once. I met up with Fighter, and they agreed to have a fight to the death, where Fighter and Bonk fought. Bonk gave Fighter a good fight, but their rage yielded to cold damage from a cantrip-infused greatsword. Bonk gave one final statement, finally getting the character development that she deserved before she died, and left character development for the Fighter. The plotline she left behind was entrusted to the twin succubi, as apparently the DM wanted to end the war by fighting a giant demon, who just showed up for no rhyme or reason. But it was finally over. I could leave, and Bonk was laid to rest. I still stuck around on the server since it was near the end of the campaign, and I did want to see where it would go, and if the DM would change after I said my piece to them. The end resulted in a mass combat giant demon fight with no true stakes, with the DM NPCs sticking back despite being healthy and winning. The epilogue included, amongst other things, the elite guard of the Emperor, never seen till now and still around after their Emperor got murdered, staged a coup in their own forces because the group defeated the giant demon. Cleric never resolved why she was chosen by a god and just banked the DM NPC. Dia's ex-arched druid wanted to marry druid because childhood friend, and, as expected, the scientist plot was resolved off-screen by Succubi and Fighter. There was talk of a sequel, but I wasn't interested. I figured while the characters would be different and potentially better, the plot would still be the sequential railroad that it was. I still kept in contact with the Fighter, as he was a pretty cool guy, and I even helped him out with the lore and logic of his campaign. TLDR? Joined a game thinking it was going to be an interactive role-playing game, only to follow DM's shonen plot with half the party being lawful stupid shonen characters. Left after 6 months with my character leaving on her own terms with much needed emotional weight and stakes. And that was today's story. I hope you enjoyed your stay and that I will see you again soon, for there are always more stories to be shared.